It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. Welcome to the show. My name's Jack Collins and I'll be your host today as we look back at a comprehensive away victory at struggling Leicester City and forwards to the visit of Manchester United to the Cottage on Sunday evening, a very, very weird kickoff time. Delighted to say that I'm joined here on the Thursday Club by Miss Elizabeth Barnard. How you doing, Liz?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. How are you, Jack?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, not too bad. It's always better the week after a win, isn't it? Even if this one felt pretty routine.
Yes. Really great to get a clean sheet away from home. Really great to get a win away from home. But I think the takeaway a few days on from the King Power is that Leicester are really, really bad.
Yeah, I think that was the thing from Leicester fans. So there was this whole bizarre thing going on. You're watching the game at the weekend, and when Fulham scored the second goal, I was pretty convinced the Leicester fans were singing "We Are Going Down." And it turns out they were actually saying, "We want Rudkin out," who is the CEO, I believe, of the football club. So I was a bit disappointed. But, I mean, look, it's a tough start for Ruud van Nistelrooy. Got that kind of bounce originally, and since then it's been pretty devastating. 7 losses on the bounce. That's a club record, I believe, for Leicester. So not particularly pretty, but with all that said, it hadn't been pretty at West Ham, and Fulham managed to go there and royally mess it up, shall we say. So to come back in here, like you say, to get that clean sheet, to have a sense of control in the midfield that I think was missing on Wednesday night or Tuesday night when we went to West Ham, all of that felt like a kind of moment to be like, okay, and reset, because there was some hysteria, some of it fueled by us, some of it not fueled by us, after last week, that Fulham were just letting this season slip away from them. And this game felt like an ability just to put your teeth in it and grab it back a little bit.
Yeah, I think we've spoken so much about how bad we are against the worst teams in the league, or not necessarily bad, but bad at breaking teams down. Obviously, West Ham was a slightly different scenario because we just lost our heads at various points throughout that match. And leaving the London Stadium at 10 p.m. on 14th of January, I thought, oh my
goodness. Bowl
goodness.
of disappointment.
Yeah, it's not my favourite away day, I'll say that. I thought, if this is a trend, this season is over. Because not only are we not going to get anywhere in the league, but also we're going to face teams like this in the Cups and we're going to get knocked out. But going to Leicester, I like all the mitigation. They are very bad. Ruud van Nistelrooy has had a really bad time in charge, etc., etc. Being able to do a comprehensive win that's also dominant, such a relief.
Yeah, I think this was it. And you kind of looked at that game, and especially at half-time at 0-0.
Oh
and
my
it's,
God, yeah.
oh, are we doing this again? And look, the first half wasn't great. It wasn't dreadful, I don't think is probably the way I'd put it. But, there's opening salvo where Leicester screaming for a penalty and they don't get it. And Butler has to make a couple of big saves. Jamie Vardy gets clear a couple of times. And you're starting to think, really? Is this what we're doing? This Leicester side, they've lost 6 times in a row. We're going to be the ones to break that snap. I know that would be incredibly Fulhamish. But there is kind of a way that Fulham pulled their way back into this game and basically took control after the break. And I wanted to give some love to Sander Berge because, I mean, it's been a talking point. I know Drew wrote about it in his column on BBC Sport. We've seen it across various bits on Fulhamish as well. But that combination of Berge and Lukic, when it's together and when it's firing, and it did in the second half, gives so much structure, gives so much solidity to this football team.
Yeah, and that's what we need ultimately against teams like Leicester and teams across the league, not allowing silly mistakes to get in the way of a generally good performance. It feels like it's been a long winter without Berge, and obviously Lukic was also out for a bit near the beginning of the season. I'm just so glad they're back. This has to be our midfield pairing going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any questions that when they're both fit and firing,
100%.
It makes so much sense. And look, actually, one of the things we did last week was we spoke pretty critically about Emile Smith-Rowe. I don't think that was unwarranted. I don't think that was untoward. He was very, very poor in that West Ham game. He wasn't great here, is probably how I put it, but he's very brave for the goal. And you know what? Some of the criticism that's been levelled at Emile Smith-Rowe is that he doesn't want to be here. He thinks he's too good for the team. I don't necessarily buy any of that. I think it's been a sense of a lack of confidence, a lack of a belief in his own ability, that coming back from the injury that seems to have set him back. throwing himself in there head first to get on the end of that. Look, he couldn't miss. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's a great finish or that, but he still has to be brave. He still has to be bold and he still has to chuck himself in where there might be feet flying around. And he does so. He was saying after the game it was his first ever header that he scored in the Premier League and that the boys have been giving him stick in training for the fact that he never scores headers. So he's like, I'll be able to give it back a little bit, which did make me smile. But nice for him to get back on the score sheet. And after that, I thought his game did improve. And, maybe that talks to that confidence, speaks to that belief in your own ability. You get a goal and suddenly it's like, oh, now I can pop the ball around a little bit. Now I start to demand it a little bit more in those areas. But in front of Lukic and Berge, I think he had a bit more of a shield to probably play his own game a little bit more as well.
Yeah, they do give him that platform to be elevated. I think with Smith Rowe, it's difficult. I don't necessarily think it's a mentality thing or a confidence thing or a work rate thing. It feels like it's kind of somewhere between the three and is quite an unsatisfying mix.
Yeah.
And like we saw it against West Ham and we saw it in the first half. He has not been putting in good performances for Fulham recently. And for a club record signing, yes, time to bed in, all of that, but we wanted him to start firing faster and start playing impressively faster. This is only a good thing, this goal, for his confidence, because, again, I feel it's a blend of the three. And once he gets a little bit of confidence, I think his work rate will improve. I don't think he's like lazy or anything like that, but I still think that generally he could give more.
I just think he's genuinely looked, and I don't mean this in kind of like a nasty way, like, it looked genuinely like he wasn't fit. Like he's been coming back from an injury and they've chucked him in too early and he sort of like labours around the pitch at times. And I think that's a frustrating thing because you're like, if he's not fit, don't play him. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the things that, so there's one of two things. It's either that you're dragging yourself around and that's just the way your gait is. And I don't think that's the case because we've seen him in full flight at points this season and he's been very, very low on his feet. But the way that he's looked in the last couple of games almost just like it takes away from that because then you're like, are you fit? Are you not fit? If you're not fit, you shouldn't be playing. If you are, why are you moving like this? Like it's all felt quite confusing, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm hopeful that this will allow him to kick on. And the Fulham Twitter put out something about this being like a launch pad or something for him to build on. I definitely feel that's the case. And again, with the midfield duo of Lukic and Berge, like I think it's a lot more of a solid base for him, and that is something he needs when he's lacking that little bit of confidence.
You mentioned clean sheets at the top of the show, and I think that this is an important one for us. It wasn't all plain sailing, and we needed some big saves from Bernd Leno. We needed some good defending at times from a couple of players, but just Fulham's fourth clean sheet of the season because Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest, Southampton. I almost don't count Southampton as a clean sheet. Like it frustrates me so much thinking about that game that it almost doesn't count in my head. But a fourth clean sheet for Fulham this season in the Premier League. Not ideal to have that few, I think, at this time in the season. But this was one that maybe the defence can build on.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you mentioned Burton, I know. It was his 100th game, I think, between the sticks for us. And when he came in, the last couple of seasons, he's been player of the season quality for me. And this season, it's not necessarily that he's dropped off, but it feels like the whole back line has not quite functioned together in the right way. Mm-hmm. And we saw that like absolutely at West Ham in terms of those giveaways and the mess with the first goal about passing out to Andreas, who obviously isn't a defender, but then him passing it. Like it just wasn't.
Yeah. It wasn't good at all from anyone. No.
And I think that slight messiness. And again, I'm not saying that Leicester particularly threatened, but having a clean sheet under our belt and him making those saves is a good sort of marker of confidence for him, for sure.
100%. And especially going into this United game where, if Fulham had won 3-2, I think, at the weekend, there would have been a sense of foreboding about whoever we played next and the amount of goals that were going in. And look, I think this is interesting because we look at what happened with the defence in the summer, and you'd say that obviously a lot of these defenders were here last year. Timothy Castagne was our starting right back last year. Anthony Robinson was our starting left back last year. By the end of the season, Calvin Bassey was our starting left centre back. So Joachim Andersen replaces Tosin Adarabioyo. And I think 99% of us would have said at the start of the season that was an upgrade.
Yeah.
And Bernd Leno remains between the sticks. And actually, defensively last year, I thought we were pretty good. And so it felt like this year we were making a step forward. And the performances, I think, defensive-wise, have been impressive at times. We've had some good games. Our defenders have had really impressive ways where we've kept teams at bay. That doesn't always translate to a clean sheet, but we've had some games where I think the defence has won us the game towards the end of things. But I wonder if this is the first place, and we can talk about Berge and Lukic and saying that 2 is better than 1 and they do the job. I wonder if this is the place that you actually do look at it and say, I didn't think we were missing Pereira, but that few clean sheets maybe suggests that we are.
How many? I feel like we haven't had a lot of Berge and Lukic together.
No,
we haven't had enough to like really draw a sample size. And I remember the first game that I thought like, oh God, I miss Pereira so much was that Villa game. And that was also the first game that Lukic was out this season. That 3-1 at home, the Fulhamish hat trick of disaster class, really. I feel between the two of them, Berge and Lukic are a suitable replacement.
So do I, but I think the difference is that instead of having to keep one player fit, or not suspended, you're having to keep two. And therefore, as soon as one half of this duo, I agree with you, I think together they're more than capable of filling that void. But the question is then, Sasha picks up yellow cards. He's taken that from JP anyway. He picks them up like they're going out of fashion. Berge has been injured for long spells. Yeah. You're trying to sort of maintain more moving parts than perhaps you had to with Pereira there.
Yeah, and we've been much more prone to injuries as well this season, which has been, again, really challenging.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it feels like we've got a great solution, but it is not deep enough. Yeah. Which, I know you've been crying out for a while for another defensive midfielder to come in.
Centre midfielder, please. Honestly, I'm begging. My hands are raised to the sky. I've been saying this since the start of the season, but it does feel like if he's not going to trust Harrison Reed, and look, that's fine. Maybe the team, I don't necessarily think so, but if Marco Silva feels that the team has moved past the need for a Harrison Reed, then, in Marco we trust in so many different ways, right? So if that is where they've got to, and I really sincerely hope it's not. I love Harrison Reed, but equally, if Marco's decided that he wants to move forward and keep the team moving in a direction, then they need to back him on that as well. And at the moment, it just does feel like there's one body too few in those defensive positions. That's meaning we're having to ram square pegs into round holes on a kind of regular basis.
The Reed thing is difficult for me because he's long term been one of my favourite players for Fulham, and I think when he's had runs of games in the side, he's got that confidence. He's been amazing. And I got Reed on the back of my shirt last season. I love him so much. I feel like he hasn't been able to give his best in the very small cameo appearances he's had recently. Because he's often coming on when there's either something to protect, which isn't just his job, or there's something to go for, which again isn't just his job, and there's a kind of desperation about the way that, everyone on the pitch is playing. I'd be so sad if this is the end of Harrison Reed's time at Fulham, but I agree with you, it looks like it is.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this about Bobby de Cordova-Reid, though, right? When Bobby left, I was incredibly sad.
I'm still not over it, Jack.
Oh, no, and I think that's fine, right? I've very rarely loved a player like that. The way that he was so versatile, his ability to score goals, sort of innate finishing ability that I thought was really underrated for his entire 100%. Time that he was here. But you also do appreciate that, there comes a point where a contract is up. Fulham not offering him a 3-year contract, I was kind of okay with. You're at that point in your career. You get a 2-year deal I thought was reasonable. Leicester offered 3, off he went. Fair enough. It's kind of what's best for all parties in many ways. But I was sad to see him go. I would be exactly the same about Harrison. But equally, at this point, I'm like, go and play. Go and play, go and get games because you're a good enough footballer to make sure that you do that. And whilst I would be desperately miss having him around the squad, I think he deserves to be playing first team football at some level at this point in his career. And currently he's not getting that with Fulham. So it's a hard one. Right. I think we will take a break there. And that is our last word on Leicester City. And we'll come on to Manchester United on Sunday after the break. Welcome back to the Fulhamish podcast, where we're going to look ahead to our game on Sunday at 7 p.m. against Manchester United. If you are headed to that game, make sure you check out Craft Beer Company. It's a family-run pub in Hammersmith Broadway. Loads and loads of weird and wonderful beers up there and in there for you to enjoy. There's loads of stuff to get your teeth into. Before or after the game, make sure you pop into Craft Beer Company. I know you'll be there, Liz, and there's lots to think about, I think, with this Manchester United game. It's been a weird week for United. Let's kind of set that out first. They beat Southampton last Thursday with 3 late goals from Amad Diallo. They then lost 3-1 at home to Brighton. There is constant talk of departures from the club. Marcus Rashford, potentially Alejandro Garnacho now at this point as well. Anthony looks like he's off to Real Betis. I'm not sure that Manchester United fans will miss him all that much. Then this report comes out that after the game, Ruben Amorim decided he was going to smash the telly in the stadium, and normally he doesn't say anything till after the game. He lets things rest, and he completely and utterly lost the plot by all accounts. Then says it's the worst Manchester United team in history to a press conference. Now, we're recording this before Manchester United play Rangers on Thursday night in the Europa League, so we don't know how they got on in that game. But, I mean, there's always drama. It's never quiet, is it?
Yeah, I feel like when Erik ten Hag got sacked in, October, I was thinking, I can't believe this Fulham team has only beat this Erik ten Hag team once. We've missed so many opportunities to have an incredibly dominant record against this quite terrible team. And it seems that nothing has been solved.
No.
And we're constantly following the soap opera with the ownership. The TV smashing story is kind of I think really embarrassing. I don't think that's a hot take, actually. Manchester United are a crisis club. It seems every week this season and for seasons gone by. And I'm just hoping that Fulham can capitalise on that.
It's like, I always say beware a wounded animal, right? And they are a wounded animal right now. And I think it's what's really weird is that we saw some really impressive performances from United. The 2-2 with Liverpool, where, they stepped up and they were like, oh, why can't we play like that every week? And then they went in the FA Cup and they beat Arsenal on penalties. Yeah. And suddenly you're like, oh, okay, maybe they've turned a corner. Maybe things have happened. And you come to that point, you get to the Southampton game, what an opportunity to build on it, right? You're at home against Southampton, you're kind of looking at it and thinking, this is it. This is where we go. This is the delight. And they are 1-0 down until sort of the 82nd minute against the worst team potentially in Premier League history, at this point, considering Southampton's points total. So not being able to build on that and then getting absolutely thumped. And I think even the most ardent United fan would tell you that they deserved nothing from that game against Brighton at the weekend. They were really, really poor. So, it's like Jekyll and Hyde at points. And you know what? In some ways, I can relate because they seem to be able to raise their game for the biggest teams in the league. And suddenly, as soon as they play anyone else, they completely and utterly fall apart. And Bruno Fernandes was saying it afterwards. He was like, after the Liverpool game, he was like, I'm really frustrated because we've shown what we're capable of today. Why on earth can we not do that in every single game? And Amorim's been saying the same thing. I think he is probably the person that if anyone can turn this club around, it's him. But equally, they haven't got the players to do the system at the moment. They're going to stick with it and they're going to try and play it through. It's going to take a couple more transfer windows and some hard truths, I think, at United before anything starts to move on a positive trajectory. This is an opportunity for Fulham.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It feels like we could spend quite a lot of time dissecting how United would set up or whatever, but it feels like actually what's most important when coming to their games is sort of emotional chaos around everyone at the club. And I hear what you're saying about we can kind of relate for Fulham that we show up against the big teams. We don't against the not little teams. That is the wrong phrase. Teams that are lower down in the leagues.
Well, we're going to struggle at the weekend. We'd never beat teams in the bottom half.
Yeah, quite. But I feel like with Fulham, it's definitely a problem. But with United, it's absolutely endemic that as soon as one thing goes wrong, they all lose our heads. And I thought that the West Ham result was the worst of our season. In terms of the way that the game played out. Yeah.
It was definitely the worst performance in terms of what we did with the ball.
Yeah. and the opposition we were facing. It feels like United are having those moments every weekend at the moment. So I'm just I'm quite hopeful, to be honest. As much as it sounds silly, and as much as United always beat us, and last season they were terrible, and they beat us 1-0 with like a last-minute goal.
If Alejandro Garnacho scores in the last minute, I honestly am gonna go for a dip in the Thames. I think. Like,
that was awful. That was what, 2 seasons ago?
Yeah.
And then Bruno Fernandes last year. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just quite, and then obviously Xerxes at the start of the year, and that was obviously the away fixture, but frustrating in so many ways. And this is it. And I wonder what the question becomes now. It's not, we're not in an era, and I don't mean this in disrespect, and it doesn't mean that Fulham are going to win at the weekend. It doesn't mean that United aren't. But, there was an era where United would come to town and you'd be like, oh, God, even if you were in cracking form and they'd lost 3 games in a row, you'd be like, how are we going to find a way to lose this? How are we going to, how are they going to beat us? Because this is what they do. That fear factor has gone completely with Manchester United. You come out onto that pitch and you look at it, and again, it doesn't mean Fulham are going to win, but I look at it and be like, this is an opportunity to get 3 points. You never used to look at Manchester United games like that. And look, this isn't new, right? It's been a decade since Manchester United were challenging seriously at the top of the table. But equally, there is still a sense, I think, of wonder that you're watching him and thinking, really? This is what it's come to? And I wonder if this is an opportunity for Fulham to actually really impose a game plan on a team. And if so, how do Fulham go about that? And what does this look like?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for a lineup that features Lukic and Berge again.
I say that it's Thursday. We haven't got to the end of training yet.
I'm looking forward to it, Jack Collins. And you know what? I quite like to see Pereira in the 10.
I thought you might say this, and I agree, but I also think that after Smith Rowe scored, you then have to give him the opportunity to go and back that up with another performance.
Yes, I hear you. I really do. If that wasn't the case, and maybe I'm sitting on the fence too much here, but I think there is a solidity that Pereira provides in the 10 that I quite like, and I prefer him generally to Smith Rowe in the 10, because I feel like Smith Rowe has more moments and Pereira is more consistently solid. Not all the time, just to clarify.
Yeah, that's fair. I think in the 10, it's been rare that Pereira's put a foot wrong. In the 10, I think. Yeah, there have been misplaced passes, etc. But you want him to take those chances. You want him to make those gambles.
And with Lukic and Berge behind him, I feel really confident about that. But I do understand your point. It would be very difficult for Marco to drop Smith Rowe.
I'd be absolutely stunned if Smith Rowe doesn't start in this game in the number 10 position.
Yeah. And then Raul up top. I'd like to see Muniz come on if we're struggling. I know it's kind of like it doesn't.
How did he miss at the weekend? By the way, I don't think enough has been made of this. It's just completely hit me. I was like, I meant to talk about this early on. That the late miss is absolutely perplexing.
I know we're 2-0 up, so it doesn't like matter, but this is what's so frustrating about Muniz. Like, it just bottles down to this. He just can't control the ball, like, in quite an easy way. Not an easy way, sorry. Obviously very difficult, but, like, he's a professional footballer. I have no idea what he's doing there.
I don't know what he's trying to do.
It's so close to the goal.
Just flick the ball back across goal. It's in the net. Like, why have you tried to... I don't know. Anyway. It really frustrated me at the time.
I'd like to see Raul start.
Yes,
but I don't mind. I know it's like a bit controversial, but I don't mind the swap at 60 for Muniz. And then
also, like, we're talking about this Manchester United team, and some of these defenders. Lenny Yoro's had an absolute stinker the last 2 games. I think he's going to be a wonderful player, and I think he's going to grow into it. But at the moment, he looks a bit all over the place. Throwing a Muniz at him, you're like, he's going to be like, I'm 19. I've dealt with strikers in the front. What on earth is this bizarre mess of Brazilian limbs? Like, why are this being like lobbed at me with 30 minutes to play?
He like defies logic, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And then Wilson and Iwobi, obviously, hopefully he's recovered from his flu.
Yeah.
That would be great. I'd love Wilson to score against United, obviously.
Yeah, it's always.
And I'd love Pereira to score against United. A lot of narrative in this fixture, I feel, for us.
Yeah, I'm quite intrigued in the battle at left back, in terms of Anthony Robinson coming up against Amad Diallo in some form. We're not sure if Diallo's going to play as a wing back or in the front two. But I saw someone describe him this week, Amad, as someone who is like trying to catch water when you're trying to defend him, and I was like, Well, let's see how Anthony Robinson gets on with it, because if anyone can do it, if anyone is quick enough to catch water, I think the answer is often Anthony Robinson. But another challenge. Now, he's dealt with some exceptionally hard, difficult challenges this season. He's dealt with Mo Salah really well. He's dealt with Bukayo Saka really well. Fulham have been interesting in those games in terms of doubling up on those players and trying to shut down the areas and see what happens. I'm intrigued to see how we go about this business against a side that are playing a slightly different shape, different formation, and that kind of three in the front line that sort of drift around each other. I'm quite excited to see how Fulham deal with it, because this is not easy. And whilst United have been poor, there are still elements of their game that I'm looking at and saying, oh yeah, okay, I like that bit. I like what you're doing there. Now, how Fulham kind of step out to that with a 4 at the back playing against that kind of system, I think is going to be intriguing.
Yeah, Robinson Ahmad is going to be a battle for the ages. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I think Ahmad is definitely United's most dangerous player at the moment, no shadow of a doubt. And
Maybe their only player.
Bruno's
been okay.
Bruno's okay. Bruno's is a good penalty taker.
He is. He's a very good penalty taker. He's also just a very good footballer. As in, I appreciate that nobody likes him, and I appreciate that he frustrates opposition fans. He's the kind of player that you love if he's on your team and you hate if he isn't. Mm-hmm. But he is a wonderful footballer for all of his, dark arts, should we say? Yeah,
no, for sure. But I think as much as our defence has not been consistently solid this season, I'm hoping that we have enough. Maybe I'm being really naive.
No, I don't think you're being naive.
I think the centre-back duo is decent. Bassey was straying forward a little bit in the Leicester game. Not totally, but...
he nearly scored.
Yeah, exactly. And he nearly scored once, but he was forward.
He was bouncing around in the 9 at times. He was in the box in the middle. I was like, what are you doing?
I don't know what Marco's doing. Well, I don't know whether it's Marco or Bassey.
I think it might just be Calvin having a day.
Yeah, just running.
He was like, this stock can't hurt us, so I'm going on a wander. Let's see what happens. He took off Bilal El Khanous to the chagrin of the Leicester fans, and he was like, right, that's it. I'm done. I'm going on a wander.
I would really like to see us push higher up and put United under the cosh a little bit, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be interesting to see how one, they approach it, and how two, Fulham try to impose on this game, because the first halves have been sort of a weird combination, right, in the last 2 games, in that we were so dominant for the first 20 minutes of the West Ham game, and then we concede from really sloppy goals. We're not as dominant against Leicester, and we actually sort of ghost through the first half a little bit, coast, whichever you prefer. But then in the second half, we're able to really, maintain that midfield control and really push onwards. Whereas the West Ham game ended up a bit like a basketball game, which doesn't hugely suit us at times. I think there are games where we want it to stretch. This is not one of them at the weekend. No. I think if it stretches, we're playing into United's hands.
100%. I think looking at the league table this season, which, we do every weekend.
More than that, I'd say.
Well, perhaps we should have enough, and it's a crazy thing to say, we should have enough to beat this iteration of Man United. Yeah. And if we don't, it will be a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, you have to kind of take it as it comes in terms of the game turns out, and if United turn up and they're absolutely brilliant and they beat us, I'll be like, well, they have that in their locker. But if United turn up and play in the way that they have done in the last 2 games and Fulham don't take all 3 points, I would agree with you. If that version of United turns up, then it will be a missed opportunity if Fulham don't win the game. If the United that turned up against Liverpool turns up, the United that turned up against Arsenal turns up, maybe that looks a little bit different. And maybe we have to kind of concede that, on their day, this is still a squad that has had a lot of money poured into it. It has a lot of talent within it and just needs unlocking in the right ways. That might happen. And to be honest, in some ways, it would be very Fulhamish for it to happen against us, for suddenly United to go Super Saiyan. But we live in hope. We hope that this one is going to be another famous night under the lights at the cottage.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And the Sunday 7 p.m. is a bit of a weird kickoff time, but I think under the lights for this game is great.
Yeah, I completely agree. Right, shall we get into some emails, Liz?
Absolutely.
What have we got today?
We are starting off with an email for you, Jack, from Tom Burrows. He says, hi lads, are we better under a Marco Silva system with one inverted winger and one playing on the side of their preferred foot? It's something I feel I've long noticed, but not sure if there's anything to it. Cheers from Tom.
It's a great question.
It's a great question.
I think that obviously we've seen a variation in terms of where things are, and it depends kind of on the fullbacks. So Fulham always want a right-footed winger on the left wing, to cut inside because it opens up that jet stream for Anthony Robinson to fly down the left-hand side. So we constantly want, whether that was Willian, there's a reason why it's a Iwobi, even Reece Nelson to an extent, right, as someone who cuts inside and tries to get into the box in those areas. I don't think that's any surprise, because when you have Robinson flying down that flank, you want someone who's going to get out of his way, to put it politely. And I think it's different on the right because the balance of play has been slightly changed with Castagna coming in for Tete. And so with Castagna in there, Castagna is a player who likes to go around the outside. Whereas with Kenny Tete, he sort of likes to come up with play and interchange. So I think that's why we saw a lot of Adama and Kenny Tete at the start of the season, because it allowed them to interchange down that flank and kind of play in areas and small triangles that allowed each other to get the best crossing opportunities or to release them towards the byline. With Castagna, that's slightly different in that he tends to hug the width. So Harry Wilson in there when Castagna's there makes a little bit more sense, I think, because he drifts inside and tries to get shots away and play close to the striker. So I think in terms of what Tom's question is, the answer is not, it has to be one inverted winger or one chalk on their boots winger. It's very much dependent on who's playing at fullback. With Tete there, I think we want a winger who likes to come inside, because Tete likes that little pocket on the edge of the box. Think about some of the crosses that he's put in from those areas, and especially when Mitrovic was here, that was the kind of bit hot spot for Kenny Tete, sort of on the edge of the box. It's tucked inside a little bit whilst a winger drags the fullback away. But with Castagna going out there, you want a winger that's coming inside in order to cause them problems. And I think Harry Wilson does that brilliantly. And I think that's why we've seen more of Wilson and Castagna than Adama necessarily as a starter over the last couple of weeks.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like it allows our fullbacks, which are some of our best assets, to be utilised in the way that they need to be. And like Tete Castagna has been such a big debate. Sessegnon Robinson, not so much.
No, sadly.
Sadly not.
As brilliant as Ryan was in the game against Watford, and he was excellent that day.
I'm going to Wigan to see him.
I'm going to go to Wigan to see him as well. He's got a good record at Wigan. He'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. But like Marco really knows those players so well, I feel, in that situation. We got another one from William Rees, which I want to hear your thoughts on, but I feel like I've kind of already expressed my thoughts on it. It's about again, the number 10 position. Hi team, Aussie Fulham fan living in Los Angeles here. What do we make of AP's absence from the starting 11 against Leicester and the no substitute minutes? I think the Emile Smith-Rowe, Andreas Pereira thing must come to a head. Fulham are not good when they're on the pitch together, and the Berge Lukic pairing is surely not to be messed with. Is Andreas Pereira set to ride the bench going forwards?
I think it's dependent on who you're playing. There are games, and I think that there are going to be games, and Smith-Rowe is either going to have to change his game or accept that in games where Fulham are playing against the ball for 70% of it, that he's not going to fit in. Because there is no point having a luxury player, and he is a luxury player. That doesn't mean he's a bad player. It doesn't mean he's worthless. It just means that in games where you need your entire team to be working against the ball, you can't really afford to carry passengers. And he is slightly a passenger out of possession, far more than AP is, for example. So either there is this kind of element that, when Fulham play Liverpool, when Fulham play Arsenal at the Emirates, you'd imagine that Pereira is going to be the player that gets into those positions and starts there because of his work rate, because of the endeavour, and because Fulham will want to play more transitionally in those games. In games where Fulham are going to dominate the ball and you want a number 10 who's going to have a little bit more guile, who can link up with players in the same way, they're games that Emile Smith-Rowe should, and I think that's the operative word here, kind of have the advantage on Pereira, because he's a little bit cuter, I think, in the final third with what he can do. So does it have to come to a head? Yes. And I do feel sorry for Pereira, because he did nothing wrong to kind of deserve his place to be taken. But also when Fulham go and spend that amount of money on a marquee player who was in demand, and you kind of go, right, this is where we're going, you can't really turn your back on that player immediately. And therefore, the number 10 spot is going to be his in most games going forward if he remains fit. So it leaves Pereira in a tricky position. Does he sort of play second fiddle 10, second fiddle 8? And we know that, as you say, that it hasn't always worked out when he's played in that role. to a point where you get to this dichotomy of, is it best to leave and play first team football? Now, we know there's no shortage of offers and desire to have Andreas Pereira at other clubs. We also know that Marco Silva absolutely adores him and wants zero part of him leaving the club at this point, because he's an important figure, one in the dressing room and two on the pitch for Marco in terms of relaying instructions. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they change. I wonder if going forward there is an element of Muniz Raul about the way that the two of them play, and you could interchange them for various games and kind of try to utilize both their skill sets. But I think for now, it's probably just best to wait and see.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily something that is or will come to a head in the sort of traditional sense of there having to be a decision one way or the other. Having said that, I think like what we've heard from Andreas Pereira's camp over the last couple of months, like the interview that he did where he spoke about kind of wanting to leave Fulham, and then the fact that he's been, from my understanding at least, relatively open about a desire to look elsewhere and all that kind of thing, makes me think the choice might be taking out of our hands. The ideal situation for me is, as you said, having that flexibility, Emile Smith-Rowe starting against teams where we think we can dominate. But Emile Smith-Rowe at the moment especially feels like quite a streaky player. And also in this league, there are not loads of games that we know we can dominate. And even teams that are in and around us, teams like Brighton and Bournemouth, I want to see Pereira on the whole start those games. So I don't necessarily think that it's something where it's not like a goalkeeper where you make the decision one way or the other.
No.
I want to have this flexibility as long as our situation allows us to.
I agree, but I do think that with the way that Fulham have gone in for Smith-Rowe and the amount of money that's been spent, and I know that it's not all about that, but like you don't go and spend 35 million on a marquee player and then not play them. Like it's just not how you operate. And equally, and you know, we've been critical of Smith-Rowe in recent weeks, and I think fairly, but equally, you do have to give a player an opportunity to bed themselves in a new team. It's not going to be immediate all the time. Like they do have to have that working relationship that builds. And actually, when he was playing with Reece Nelson and Alex Iwobi in those areas, things looked really smart at the start of the season. And I think that's not a coincidence. You know, he's got to find that ability to gel with everybody else at the same time. And the other kind of wild card in all of this is Josh King, right? Because you know, we get to a point here, and look, I'm crying out and saying this constantly for us to bring in another midfielder who plays that 6-8 role, with, you know, someone to find some cover in those spaces. If you bring that player in and one of them has to leave, it's not going to be Smith-Rowe after buying him this summer. It's not going to be Josh King, who's the great academy prospect at the moment. That leaves one man, and it leaves AP as the odd one out. Now, I don't want to see him go anywhere, but there is kind of an element that if you were to remove one of the 10s from the equation, does that offer the opportunity to Josh King to actually get those extra minutes and work his way into this side? We know what a phenomenal talent he is at this point. Are you risking alienating him if you keep everyone around and there are two players in front of him going into that slot week in, week out, and nowhere for him to play?
Yeah. You're right. And obviously also in terms of coming off the bench minutes, we've got TC in that position as well.
Yeah, although I think we're going to see TC mostly in a deeper role from now forward. Yeah,
perhaps. Although he's so much... I just feel he's so much better and more enjoyable when we see him in the 10. But
sure, if you're going to start him, I think you'd have to start him in the 10. But if you're going off the bench, I think you're either, like you say, you're either chasing something or you're looking for control, and he can do both of those things from a deeper role. Yeah,
I guess. I feel the thing about also TC is he's not really starting anymore, which is great. Did you see the video the club put out?
Very nice. I was going to bring this up because I kind of was just going to take your points on it, but like we can go into it from there. Lovely segue just built in. It was really, really lovely. How much did you cry?
Two big tears rolled down my face. I'm actually feeling teary even speaking about it. Yaz is laughing from behind the camera for those who can't see. It reminded me of how rare it is to have a one club player like that. Like it was unbelievably emotional. I just counting back the years. Wow, it really, really got me. Did you cry?
I was quite emotional as well, though I think I would hesitate to call Tom Cairney a one club player, considering he played for Hull and Blackburn before we arrived.
I hear you. I still stand by that. I think like
one club player.
No, but okay, maybe not in the literal sense, Jack. I'm calling him a one club player because like 100% of his heart is here.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I'm not sure that's how I would determine it. I wasn't so sure. I'm not doubting your statement for what it's worth. I'm kind of doubting that that's the definition as opposed to anything else. But look, we're straying away from the topic here, and the topic is that Tom Kearney has done a decade at this club, and it's all very emotional, and it's very lovely. And look, the last player that got a testimonial at Fulham was Simon Morgan, Mr. Fulham, back, towards the end of the 90s, right?
Yeah.
And they captioned that image, Mr. Fulham. And I thought that was quite nice. Like, I was like, oh, that's a touch. And it's a bit of a head touch to everyone who was there during the 90s and saw Simon Morgan. And, there was so much to like about that post. I'm like, my face hurts, I'm smiling. It really was a really lovely. It was well put together as well, because some of those years were really bad, and they managed to sort of exclude them. So basically, like they did too. It was like he was also this age and this age, and if it had been a bad year in the Premier League, there was like one of him lifting the Championship trophy and one of him scoring in the Championship. It was like, I see what you've done here.
My favourite was the 2018-19 season. They had, I think he scored like one goal that season. We were dreadful. That was the Ranieri season. And he scored one goal, and it was the day that his baby was born. So he did the little thumb mouth celebration. And I'm like, that is like the only good thing that happened that season. Yeah. And yet they managed to pull it out. So
we were talking about this actually recently on Ranks, and I was discussing sort of flash in the pan games, because we were talking about the Everton Tottenham game. This is a complete tangent, but we're talking about things now, so let's just do it. And we were like, I was like, I hope for Everton's sake it's not just a flash in the pan game. And they were like, that doesn't happen. I was like, that does happen. I was there when Fulham beat Brighton 4-2 at the Cottage, and Luciano Vietto scored, and everyone was like, oh, it's all going to work. It's all going to work. It's going to be absolutely fine. We were 2-0 down. I'm pretty sure Glenn Murray scored both of them. And then, you come back and you're like, wow, we're going to be fine. It's going to be absolutely grand. Like, Luciano Vietto's on the score sheet. Nothing is going to be a problem. I don't think we won again for the rest of the season.
No. Do you remember when we beat Liverpool 1-0?
Yeah. That was the Scott Parker high point.
Yeah, and pretty much the only one that season. But we thought the whole trajectory is going to change. So
we won twice that one, because we won twice in Merseyside, didn't we? We beat Everton and then we beat Liverpool.
Yeah, but the Everton one was good, and the Liverpool one was like amazing because they were the champions, and we were like, they were on a bad run of form. We're really going on a tangent here.
Yeah, I mean,
but Sammy's not here, so we can do what we want.
Yeah, the cat's away, and so the mice are running around in the studio, as we say. Right, so I think that might be time though to call this a day. So it was left for me to do is say thank you very much to Miss Elizabeth Barnard.
Thank you so much for having me, Jack. I've had a blast.
It's been a lot of fun. I always enjoy having you on the Thursday Club, Liz. I've been Jack Collins. This has been the Thursday Club on Fulhamish. Thank you so much for listening or watching as ever. We appreciate you. Looking forward to that game against Manchester United on Sunday. George and the gang will be back on Monday to talk it all through. But for now, from us, thank you for listening. You Whites.